today. Welcome, welcome to our webinar, which is being recorded, Leveraging New Industry Data for Allied Health Excellence, where we'll be taking a look at ways that educators and employers can work together to solve today's greatest healthcare workforce challenges. We're thrilled to have a diverse group of participants. Among us are esteemed educators, innovative employers, and accomplished certification holders. We're delighted to have each and every one of you with us. As we dive into today's session, I'd like to remind everyone to please keep your microphones on mute to ensure a smooth and uninterrupted experience for all. Let's see here. Before we get started, I'd like to highlight an important part of today's webinar. At the conclusion of our session, we'll be sharing a survey. Your feedback is invaluable to us as it helps us tailor our offerings to better serve your needs. And here's a little extra incentive. By completing the survey, you'll be entered into a drawing for a chance to win a $50 Amazon gift card as our way of saying thank you. Additionally, we'd like to ensure that you have access to all of the great content from today's webinar. So we'll be sending out a copy of the presentation deck, as well as a link to the on-demand recording. Now, before we get into the heart of the presentation, I have a quick update. Shannon Joseph was unexpectedly called up for jury duty. So let's all extend a warm welcome and our kindest regards to our sole presenter for the day, the remarkable Jessica Langley. Jessica has been instrumental in shaping the content of this webinar, and we're incredibly fortunate to have her expertise. Jessica, the virtual stage is yours. Would you like to introduce yourself and kick things off? And I think you also have an announcement.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If you don't know me, my name is Jessica Langley. I'm the Executive Director of Education and Advocacy for the National Health Career Association, or NHA. I have been with the organization for 10 years, and I have a clinical background and also was in health science education as an instructor, a clinical coordinator, and an administrator for over 12 years. So I'm always happy to do these, and hopefully we'll be able to share some great information with you. And the special announcement is you all get a sneak peek today. Some of the data and research that we're sharing today is part of our 2024 Industry Outlook research. We do this every year, and this webinar is kicking it off, and we'll be promoting it in many different ways following this webinar. So you guys are going to get the first look at some of the data points and how those are impacting today's trends and topics. So we will jump right in and get started. Here is just a little bit about how you guys can get access to the 2024 Industry Outlook. You can scan the QR code on the screen here, and it will let you download the full report that has tons of insights on today's trends, challenges that allied health educators are experiencing, and what they're also looking for from allied health professionals across the different professions that NHA serves. As always, we're excited to release this data, and starting today, we are going to share the top trends and some of the key insights that came out of that. Next slide. So as we look at the research that we collected through Industry Outlook, we are going to kind of divide that into three sections for today. We're going to talk about allied health workforce, look at some of the challenges, some things around highlighting practices in credentialing and hiring, and discussing non-traditional pathways. The second area is going to be around health science education. And again, identify the top trends, the roles that credentials are playing in this space, and an increased need for skills application. Any of you that are just following the headlines, you'll know that skills-based training, skills application, non-degree credentials, all of that is really top of mind when we talk about education. And then the last section is around allied health advocacy. We got a lot of really great feedback when we held a National Innovation or Advisory Board meeting at the end of last year around, because of some of the challenges and the trends that we'll be talking about today, advocacy around allied health is really impacting those. So we're going to dig in just a little bit around that, what's kind of shaping that and how we can all help support it. So jumping into allied health workforce, go to the next slide. So a lot of this may be trivial to most of you who have lived in the allied health space for a while, but I do think it's very important when we talk about the allied health landscape is to get a big picture of who is really making up this very important part of the healthcare ecosystem. So if you don't know, there are about 9 million allied health workers in the United States. That's just allied health. So that is traditionally defined as many of the professions that do not include physicians or nurses. So that makes up about 80 different professions and subsets within that 9 million. And surprisingly, we are 60% of the healthcare workforce. So really we outnumber the doctors and nurses, but when you see headlines and when we talk about trends, it's traditionally only focused around physicians and nurses. So we're really gonna make a point both during this webinar and just kind of in our strategic initiatives throughout the year to really elevate the voice of allied health professionals and allied health careers and look to try and give it a bigger voice. We also know that allied health professions are high demand, high growth areas. So 18% is the growth of the, kind of the average of the professions within allied health that they're growing, the pace at which they're growing between now and through 2026. So that's a much higher number than the national average of growth for specific industries. This is just another view that I like when we're talking about the big picture of allied health professions. What this does is it kind of shows you where some of the main, this is of course not all of them, but the different allied health professions lie in terms of how much education do they need, and then also how much of them are administrative, which would be to the left, or more patient focused or like direct clinical care facing. So if you see the very hands-on respiratory therapy, EMT, medical assistant are to the far right, but those are traditionally an associate's degree or below. You go above and you will see things like physical therapy, diagnostic imaging or medical imaging, occupational therapy that could be anywhere from an associate's, bachelor's, or even higher as a master's or even a doctor for physical therapy or speech therapy. Next slide. Okay, so within healthcare workforce, these are our top 3 trends that we are pulling out from our data and research that we did. We want to present these and then this data set and make sure that we really highlight kind of how these issues are impacting day-to-day operations. Now, I won't do as good a job as Shannon would have done if she'd have been here, but we'll really try and merge the two together. So the top 3 for today that we're going to dig just a bit deeper into. The first one is healthcare workforce shortages are really not expected to end anytime soon. Again, headlines are calling this a crisis. And we're projected to have a 3.2 million shortage by 2026, and that's across all professions. Workforce shortages are forcing us to rethink how we're delivering care, also rethink how we're hiring, recruiting, onboarding, training, keeping, retaining all of these people within our organizations once we have them hired. So we have to maximize the people that we have. And then the third one is around healthcare employers are showing increased value of industry certifications. So we know we're in a very high skilled environment right now. So those industry certifications are really being highlighted as an assessment tool and a validation tool in the hiring phase, or even in the training aspect of upskilling individuals within their organizations. Next slide. All right, so digging into this first one around having over a 3 million projected shortage of workers by 2026. I just saw a new report that came out from the American College of Healthcare Executives, and it has their biggest challenge. So this is coming from CEOs, C-suites of large health systems in the country that said their biggest concern for the 3rd year in a row was the shortage of of workforce individuals. And even more so, they stated specifically the shortage of technicians. So when we say technicians, those traditionally fall into that allied health space. And it was their biggest concern, and that was at a percentage of 87%. So that's really, really high. There's also other stats in here that represent a high percentage of allied health staff shortages. So we know that this is a problem and an issue, and that we really need to address it. We're also seeing high turnover. Obviously, during the pandemic, that was expected, but we haven't necessarily seen it rebound to the extent that we would like to. So 600,000 resignations has increased steadily from about 400,000 per month. That was the beginning of the pandemic, to nearly 600,000 in May of 2023, which is post-pandemic. We would have thought that we would have seen the adverse kind of reaction to that. I also want to make sure that we understand, like, why is this shortage happening? Is it all from the fallout of having, a global pandemic? And the thing is it's really not. That's only one factor. We really have a perfect storm happening here. So not only did we lose workers because of the pandemic, some didn't come back to work. Some, are still experiencing the burnout, maybe, the mental stress of just being in healthcare. We also have an increased demand. So not only are people, I don't want to say sicker, I don't think that's a word. People have more chronic diseases that need addressing. They're living longer. We have a larger population of aging adults. Again, we mentioned the burnout between, individuals working. Retention is super low, so we're having that ton of turnover. We also are not having as many individuals enter into education training programs or into the workforce, directly into the workforce, into healthcare roles. So we don't have as many students. That means not as many graduates. On the backside, because we're experiencing these shortages, we're also not able to open up as many internships, externships, or clinical sites to train these individuals that need to come in. So if you think about it, it's this revolving door of issues and problems that are contributing to this workforce shortage. The other one was educators as well, and we'll dive a bit more into that in the next section. The second one, workforce shortages are forcing new models for training and upskilling. So the thing to note here is that at 82% employee retention, they think that career laddering for them will help increase their retention rates. So that's a big focus for health systems, hospitals, clinics, doctors' offices, is if they can get the people, these workers, these skilled workers in the door, and offer them a ladder, a career pathway, to higher skills, advanced skills, other roles or positions, that they're going to be able to retain them. And we do see that that individuals think that way as well. 70% of employers, because of this, are creating new hire training programs or reskilling programs to help give the staff what they want in order to keep them. So allowing them mobility to move up within their career. We also received from the Industry Outlook the top 3 reasons or ways that employers are trying to solve these workforce challenges. One of them, as we just mentioned, was really around upskilling their employees to retain them. They're also still using agencies, which we're trying to get that down because that just drives up cost. And then we're also looking at training existing staff. So not just new people coming in, but existing employees that have demonstrated really great soft skills, essential skills, durable skills is kind of the word of today. And maybe they're working in a non-clinical or non-patient facing role, but they want to do more within the organization or do something different or advance their career. They're going to bring them over and be able to teach them what they need to perform in a specific role. I also have a additional stat here that says 71% of employees believe certification is important to their retention. So this is going to lead into the next stat where we talk about how we're seeing the value of credentials and skills-based training increase. And now employers are recognizing that at an even higher level for its value. So if we want to move on to the next slide. So we have been capturing data. As many of you know, at the heart of our business, NHA started out as a certification organization, and we've expanded to offer many more tools and resources to support allied health educators, employers, and individuals. But we have been capturing data on certification value, recognition, percentage of how many employers are recognizing NHA's credentials, and things like that. And we have seen these data points rise year over year. So one aspect that's been supporting the value of non-degree pathways or skills-based training is that fewer companies are actually requiring college degrees. So we're seeing, instead of them accepting formal education, they're looking at these alternate routes of verification of skills. And that is now being seen more in the way of industry recognized certifications. They're also looking at stackable credentials as well. If someone comes in multi-skilled that has multiple, that even brings more value to their organization and to the role. Right now, 80% of employers are requiring certifications for some of the top professions like MA, farm tech, and phlebotomy. 74%, this stat isn't listed on here. Oh, yes, it is. We actually did the growing percentage between 21 and 23. So between 21 and 23, we've seen that employers are paying individuals when they earn certification at a pretty significant rate, from 56 all the way up to now 74% being paid more when they earn that professional credential. So that's awesome. 84% of employers also say that they would hire a candidate that has a credential over one that does not. And I think that's a great stat as well. And then they also believe at 79% that certification is an indicator of an individual's performance. So if they've gone through the steps to maintain eligibility to sit for a certification exam, have successfully passed that exam, they're showing dedication to their profession, all of those work into kind of the value of employee that is going to be in the performance that they're gonna demonstrate in the specific role. Next slide. Okay. I can pause for just a second here and see if there are any questions regarding kind of the healthcare workforce side of things. I do see one question in here from, I think it's Sue. Give me just a second and I might be able. Have you quantified the value of certified MAs in patient outcomes? That's a great question, and we're always looking at that. There have been some research done around things like efficiency, cost effectiveness, ratios, right, of MAs. Patient satisfaction, I think, is probably the core patient outcome that can be tied back to MAs because they're spending, the majority of the time with patients. But it's very hard to find complete kind of research or stats on that. We're always looking for those. We're always also inviting our customers and clients to work on case studies or to do efficacy studies alongside of us. If you're implementing a new training program, if you're upskilling your MAs, thinking about what the potential outcomes could be on that so that we could share it out to the rest of the industry. So keep that in mind if anybody has ideas, and always feel free to reach out to us. So thanks for that. All right, moving into health science education. We all know that industry is really driving educational needs and trends, and our educational programs support those high skill, high demand industries and their needs. So we have 4 top trends here that we're seeing in the health education space. One is an increased demand, as we've mentioned previously, in short-term certificate skills-based educational programs. So these are traditionally anywhere from 1 year or less programs being offered potentially in a career and tech ed space in high school. They could be in a community college. They could be also in an adult kind of tech center or adult learning center as well. The next one is big. We are experiencing teacher shortages and faculty turnover. We know that limited faculty support is impacting the outcomes of our graduates. We've always said, you know, the quality of your teachers is a direct reflection of the individuals that are graduating. They have such a high impact with them. So we've got to do better and figure out how we try and recruit more teachers, train them, because in this space, as many of you, and I can speak to this personally as well, we're practitioners first, and we are traditionally moved over into the educational side with no formal educational training. And so that's a gap that we've got to work to close. We're also seeing industry credential value rise in education, and it's also strong in workforce, as we mentioned. And there is also a need for increased skills application. So what we're seeing is a gap in what we call kind of the theory to practice or classroom to practice gap. And really what that equals is job readiness. So are students able to take the knowledge that we're sharing with them or that they're learning and actually turn it into that applied learning, you know, and how they would practice it in the actual profession or job setting. So let's dive into these. The first one is increased demand for skills-based training. We are moving into a skills economy, especially in healthcare. That's a system that's built on individual skills that a person possesses. It can also be made up of their work and life experiences, other accomplishments, and personal networking. So we are really looking, and schools in particular, expanding their kind of continuing education, their workforce development divisions, and looking at how they can maximize all of the skills that an individual possesses, and also attract them into careers in allied health. We are continuing to see growth in our career and tech ed space. So from 2020 to 2021, there were 8.3 million high school students who participated in CTE programs, which is an increase of 800,000 students from the previous year. Now that is spread across 16 career clusters. Within health science pathways or the health science or medical cluster, there are about 900,000 students participating just in health science courses in CTE across the country. So that's a lot of kids. It's one of the higher populated clusters, and we need to continue to build and grow that, to build that pipeline into new employees. We are, however, still seeing a slight decline in post-secondary enrollments. However, in the fall of 2023, we're still waiting to get spring, or this would be spring enrollment numbers. But in the fall, we saw undergraduate certificate programs go up almost 10%. Now, again, those are ones that are not necessarily, you know, accomplishing a degree. They are those skills-focused short programs looking to get them career ready. Healthcare undergraduate and associate degree programs are growing at about 6% and 4%. So that's good that we're in the positive. And even though we have this need and we're seeing some positive numbers for skills-based education, we're not quite meeting that need. 86% of faculty and staff say that there's still a need for new skills-based learning models to incorporate them into their institutions, but only 22% of institutions have actually implemented them. So that's another area that we can try and support, is how do we create programs really tailored around delivering skills and right sizing the content so that individuals can learn what they need, apply it, and go to work quickly. The next one is us speaking about our teacher and faculty shortages. There's not a ton of support. And again, we are seeing that impact kind of the outcomes on the back end of not having those highly qualified or enough teachers to support the educational process. So there's about a nationwide shortage of 55,000 teachers. That's a lot. And if you see here, we actually had a quote from one of our clients that says, you know, it's difficult to find someone to teach in a medical field. In this case, it was medical assisting. Again, we find that person that has done the job or has an MA background, but no formal education. And you try and teach them that, you know, but that's difficult. Or you can do it the other way. You have someone who has formal education training, but no skills or profession-based training. So either way we look at it, there's a gap there that we have to overcome. We're also, as we mentioned, seeing challenges with being able to really connect with the skills application or practical application of skills to ensure that our graduates are job ready. So only 60% of employers believe that graduates have the skills they need for those entry-level roles. So again, and this is nothing new, I have been working in the allied health space for over 25 years. I'm aging myself, but back when I first started into this, we were gathering feedback from our advisory boards. And even back then they were saying, you know, we have this gap in skills, whether it be soft skills or clinical skills, hands-on skills, you know, it still exists. So this is not a new problem. It's just something that in the light of us having not only a big shortage, we absolutely need the individuals that are working in the space to be highly skilled and highly trained to deliver the best level of care that we can. Also, if you see here, just one example of how this shortage is impacting, the lack of instructors is the top reason that high schools or CTE or career centers do not add new health science programs because they don't have availability of instructors, which then again, that's going to decrease the number of students coming in that impacts the pipeline of graduates moving into the workforce. So once again, it's this this vicious cycle that we're experiencing right now that we have to try and find a way out of. The next slide is our third one in this area. The value of credentials is strong. We can see here, as I mentioned, certification requirement. That percentage is really high within some of our main professions, MA, pharm tech, phlebotomy. 80% of employers are recognizing them. And we've seen that number grow steadily year over year. If you download the full report, you could get some of that historical information across professions. So I encourage you to do that. We have employers that are valuing credentials because that is giving them that kind of third party or that external verification that that individual has the knowledge and skills in order to do the job correctly, in order to deliver patient care or patient safety at a high level. So that is certainly, I know we probably don't have a direct way of measuring that impact in terms of the level of skill of a medical assistant to the impact on a patient outcome. But I would say medical errors, things like that could directly be tied back to an individual's knowledge and skill level and what we're seeing, you know, if we're seeing any adverse effects in the clinics or in the health systems on that. Something else to note is that across our country, nearly every state has a post-secondary workforce attainment goal for its population. Now, this is not just healthcare specific, this is across all industries, but there are multiple national initiatives and efforts along with state level goals that are in play right now to where they are, again, not focusing on those higher level degrees, but looking at their entire population and saying, post high school, we've got to get these individuals some sort of skills training, some sort of post-secondary credential in order for them to be workforce ready. So the last one in this section is a need for increased skills application. Again, that's closing this classroom to practice gap. During COVID, we did experience some learning loss because we were not able to get face-to-face. We were not able to go a lot of the times to do externships and internships. So we did see a gap, a mismatch come in terms of being able to get into the lab, do demonstrations, get in front of a patient and either do observations or actually do hands-on learning. So now we're starting to really lean into simulation and high-level engaging activities and learning methodologies to help close that gap. 44% of employers are seeing a gap in skills application, saying that they're just not prepared for their role. So again, those two kind of go hand in hand. The other thing that I want to put out there is there was a report that came out earlier this month from the Institute for Safe Medication Practices. And it states that clinicians who trained during the pandemic missed significant learning experiences. And this one gave an example of up to 30% of nurses that had fewer than 2 years of work experience. They didn't feel were as prepared to practice medicine or practice within their skill set, according to that report. And that lack of confidence, that lack of skills, combined with burnout, was really a big impact to our workforce. So something to just note there. It's not just in allied health, it's across all of our clinical healthcare professions. All right, let's jump into our last section here. This is on allied health advocacy. If you want to go to the next slide. As I've mentioned throughout this presentation, we are really discussing and experiencing a healthcare workforce crisis. We've recognized some of the causes and impacts and results. And one of those areas, as I mentioned previously, was that we got feedback from healthcare leaders and innovators from industry that says, we've got to do a better job of not only recognizing allied health professions, but raising awareness and educating people around the opportunities to go into these careers and what those careers look like for them. What does a career pathway look for them? And so we want to make sure that NHA positions ourselves as a leader in this space, helping in ways like career exploration in the high schools, awareness of the opportunities that exist within there, and then also support and recognition on the policy side. So whether that be state level or federal level, we'll get into some examples of where we might be able to provide some feedback. So when we talk about increased awareness, this is something that we kind of put together to show really the foundational and the foundation and growth support that allied health professions give within the healthcare ecosystem. So if you notice on the bottom, we really are, allied health professionals are the essential kind of undervalued front line of our healthcare system, whether it's a medical secretary or medical administrative assistant, or a medical assistant, or a patient care tech in a hospital, or a CNA. We're that first experience that patients get, and the first level of care to be delivered to them. So we really are that front line. We also have really diverse skill sets. If you look across those 80 different professions that I mentioned, high skills, high expertise, and we really contribute significantly to positive health outcomes through those services that are provided. We also promote optimal health, function, improvement, and quality of life. If you think about the diagnostic and therapeutic services that are delivered from allied health professionals, we also many times work together with other healthcare leaders to diagnose, prevent, treat diseases. We also work to continue to influence the delivery of medical care in different ways and advocating on behalf of patients. We also deliver comprehensive care that not only addresses patients' physical aspects, but we also contribute to the team-based care approach, putting patient at the center and giving those wraparound services so that every individual that's giving care to that patient is giving the care that they are, their level of expertise in their area of expertise that they can give. We also perform duties that are, again, that foundation, but allowing other healthcare professionals to work to the top of their license or more effectively to carry out and deliver that high quality level of work. So the next slide is how can we support and in what ways can we provide support for allied health professionals? And there's a number of ways that we can do that here. One is increase allied health education and training opportunities. So we can provide support for programs to expand both in the secondary space, post-secondary and workforce development, provide tools and resources and guidance on how to set up or start new programs, increasing the number of programs, fostering relationship building. That's really big. We know that the relationships that educators have with employers is really, really important because it really takes both sides to get that individual job ready. So being able to make those connections is key. We also want to really support academic preparedness. Again, it's closing that gap. How can we make sure that these individuals can apply the skills that they're learning? We also want to help with recruit and retaining these professionals, whether that be through professional development, advanced skills training, finding opportunities for them to grow within their careers. We can promote policies that provide financial incentives, both on the education and the workforce side. So whether that's doing things, and we'll mention this in the next slide, but approving non-degreed programs, allowing them to receive federal Pell Grant money for those, whereas right now you only receive federal funding if you are going through a degree granting program. So just changing things up to where they are better supporting skills-based training. We also want to make sure that we're removing any barriers for individuals to explore and actually complete allied health training and degrees, and then just advocate overall for the contributions that allied health professions make and give and provide to the healthcare system. I don't know how many times as I was in medical imaging, so as an x-ray tech or a CT tech, that I just got called a nurse. And a lot of the times we didn't correct the patient. And that's just one small example of not being, not advocating and saying, well, actually, I'm an imaging professional and that's very different from a nurse. And this is this is what it entails, taking every opportunity that we have to really recognize and build up those professions and their contributions. All right, the next slide. On the regulatory front, so there has been a lot of activity when we talk about mostly federal level initiatives. However, we are not seeing a lot of movement. So we all know this is a election year, and we also know that we have a divided legislature. So very little work is actually being done, but we are seeing some positive movement through various funding pathways, different pieces of legislation. For example, I mentioned the Bipartisan Workforce Pell Act, which is looking to provide eligibility to students in short-term programs so that they can get federal funds. We have the Allied Health Opportunity Act that has been introduced, and this is a way to give students or to support dual or concurrent enrollment in allied health programs so that they are getting college credit for the work that they're doing. We also have, let me look through here. There has been a couple of career-connected high school grant programs, strengthening community college grant programs, both of which could impact or give funds for healthcare training. And then I think I was seeing something about the paper ceiling, but there's also been a Department of Education initiative called Raise the Bar, Unlocking Career Success, which is a joint effort across the DOE and the Department of Labor and Commerce to support leaders and other communities to help students earn post-secondary degrees or industry credentials that employers are looking for in these high demand, in demand professions. So there's a lot of stuff happening. Unfortunately, not much, again, of it is moving. There are some pieces that may unfortunately negatively impact us in this space. So as we know, many allied health programs exist within career colleges or community colleges. And we have some gainful employment rules that are going to go into effect in July that may impact specifically medical assisting program because of the way the rules are written and the measures by which a school has to meet certain benchmarks. We may see that impact specifically the field of medical assisting. So we'll have to monitor that. We also are trying to get WIOA and the Higher Education Act passed. It has been a number of years since either of those have been updated. So we're pushing for that. And then we also really watch the budgets for each year as well, because Perkins funding has a big impact on the career and tech ed training. And since so much health science education is happening in that space, it has a pretty large impact. We are also seeing a few states that have increased their regulations around specific professions. For example, medical assisting, 5-10 years ago, there might have been one state that was regulating medical assistants as it relates to education, training, and certification. And now I believe we have around 5 states that have specific rules in place that say or state a education and or certification requirement, with South Carolina being the most recent one. So lots happening in this space. And again, if you guys ever have state specific initiatives that are happening and you want support or you need data or research, reach out to NHA and we would be happy to help and provide any information that might be beneficial to the work being done in your states. The other thing and last thing that we can do is NHA, as a part of Ascend Learning, it has signed on and become a part of a national healthcare workforce coalition. So I put the information here about the coalition, and the purpose is really around just kind of pulling stakeholders together to advocate for really a stronger healthcare workforce. So trying to, combat this shortage that we're seeing. And individuals and organizations can also become a part of the coalition. There is a website there on the screen that you can see. And then we also I just wanted to share just a quick comment there from our president of Ascend Learning Healthcare about how Ascend is pleased to join the Healthcare Workforce Coalition and collaborate with the experienced leadership that the coalition brings together. So the stronger the members are of a coalition, the bigger voice we have, especially when we're talking about policy changes and things like that. So we just encourage you all to check it out and become a member if that's something that you are maybe passionate about doing. Okay, I think we have come to the summary here. So 3 key areas that we talked about today across allied health workforce, health science education, and allied health advocacy. You can see our three to 4 points in each of them On the workforce side, we're dealing with healthcare workforce shortages, trying to figure out how to increase recruiting, hiring, training, and upskilling efforts, and really getting as many people skilled and trained and awarding of industry credentials and certifications so that they can go out and perform in the jobs. In education, again, focusing on skills-based education, but hard to do when we have teacher shortages and faculty turnover. However, credentials resulting from these skills-based training programs is being recognized at a higher level from workforce and employers, which is great. And we've got to work on making sure that individuals that receive those certifications are able to really apply the knowledge and skills that they have learned into the practice setting. And then on the advocacy side, just take any chance and opportunity that you have to educate or inform people about allied health professions, the careers within allied health, and the valuable and important work that all allied health professionals do as a part of the healthcare ecosystem. We are essential, and the system wouldn't run without us. Attention is also needed to just support these professions to try and get, funding and other support at both the state and federal level. And any chance that we can get to support legislation or regulation for allied health professions is always a positive for our industry. So I am going to look here through some questions. Let's see.
Jessica, this is Connie.
Yes.
I've been monitoring the Q&A, and there's 4 or 5 questions there if you want to.
Let's do it.
Okay. Did this research and surveys include anything about trained preceptors who work with new MAs?
So we did not specifically ask about preceptors. However, we did get a lot of feedback from our innovation or advisory board at the end of 2023, and that was on top of not having experienced teachers in the classroom, the equivalent to not having, skilled or qualified preceptors. So the preceptors need to know a bit about education and vice versa to allow them to have and evaluate those students in the clinical space the same way that we're evaluating teachers and students in the educational space. So it is also an area of concern and was an area of need in terms of both educational teachers and preceptors. We need to have more training for them and have it easily accessible for them to accomplish. So it is an issue and a problem as well that we are aware of.
Another question, was there any data with regards to additional payment for speaking multiple language in the allied health space?
We didn't ask a specific question on that. However, I do believe that organizations, again, it's up to them and they're not all going to be the same or consistent, but, that's an added skill that many employers across any industry find valuable. And my hopes would be that they would pay or recognize that for individuals. Some of them even put it in their job postings for specific, areas that it's a requirement. So I would hope that compensation would be considered for that as well, but we did not ask a specific question on that. Might be a good one for the future though. Thank you.
Was there any mention about post-secondary schools considering bachelor in healthcare education with certifications in allied health instructor?
Yeah, so of course those programs exist. There are, educational pathways for practitioners to take to become teachers, especially at the state level, to go through a form of, educational certification in order to be able to teach in a high school. I don't know that a bachelor's level degree is necessary. Now, some universities and things like that have specific, guidelines in place in order to do that. But I think the most successful path to this is figuring out how can we streamline the process, get them, you know, the most important knowledge and skills needed to be effective into the classroom as quickly as possible, because nobody has the time to go, you know, an additional 2 years to school. Now, I mean, I have a master's in education, so I'm not saying that it's not valuable, because it absolutely is. But that's hard to do if you're working, you know, a job at the same time, to complete that. And a lot of the experiences that I've seen is we need an instructor right now, you know, regardless of the setting. So it's typically a more streamlined need than that.
There was a related note that one of the factors that could help increase instructors to return to the, for NHA to return our CHI program that we had, Certified Healthcare Instructor. It was nice to be a certified instructor with NHA as a CHI.
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Connie.
No, that was just in relation to the previous question. Another question was related back to the information you noted with perhaps changes in the MA space coming in the summer.
Was that for a specific state or?
I think you noted changes maybe in July surrounding MA programs. I'm trying to remember what slide that was. Gainful employment rules.
So I know NHA, if you haven't, go on the website. We've got a new MA exam, new prep being launched. I believe that's already out. In terms of state level stuff, there is in South Carolina, July, there is a deadline in July for that certification requirement for medical assistants to take effect. If you want more details, because that's a tricky state and there's some things happening in that state right now to get the language amended, reach out to me personally via email and we can chat about that. I don't believe there's any changes in Ohio that I'm aware of, but if there are and you've got some background information, we can try and look and tackle that together. I'm happy to dig into that for you. About the gainful employment, I do see that one as well. So that I can provide more details on that if you email me. It is on a program by program basis, but your institution, if you're receiving federal funds right now, should be looking into that and putting a plan together. But I can give you just, you know, pure data points and details on how they're going to be measuring and what those benchmarks are. So I could share that with you. What else, Connie?
Any information on programs using apprenticeship approaches and training for MAs?
Oh yeah, so apprenticeship is the other hot topic. Of course, we didn't ask about that in our data. That's more of an industry trend. A lot of federal funding, a lot of federal support coming for apprenticeships, and we are seeing an increase in healthcare apprenticeships. We work with many institutions that are implementing apprenticeships and are happy to look at, you know, coming alongside organizations to deliver the content and certification as an industry recognized credential is a requirement of an apprenticeship. But yes, we're seeing more and more people do that because it removes barriers for individuals. If they are like, well, I can't quit my job, you know, I got to have income in order to pay my bills. I can't stop working and go to school. So in the earn to learn model, right, they're able to learn the skills and get paid for the time that they're learning, and you know, removes that barrier of not having to work full-time or work 2 jobs to try and make it through school.
There's another question, health science education specifically. Is there a recommended student to instructor ratio for patient care tech? Interested in new program in Texas.
I would have to see if I don't believe there's any regulations around patient care techs in really any state. They typically fall under what we call the UAP scope of practice, which is unassisted licensed personnel. So I'd have to look at Texas specifically, but we do not have any individual recommendations for, you know, teacher to student ratio in that sense. Now, most states do have teacher to student ratios for CNAs, and we know those two are fairly similar in the skill set, but we don't have a recommendation. I would have to look to see if the states specifically have one. I also noticed in here there were a couple questions about in the CTE space with students' age restrictions within states. So as you know, NHA allows individuals under age 18 up to a year before they graduate to take their certification exams once in high school, once completing those programs. However, the high schools sometimes have challenges getting them internships or externships because of their age and, you know, state level restrictions. So it's either state level restrictions or even some employers are not allowing students under 18. You know, it's something that we've removed the barrier on our side, and we're constantly working with employers to try and convince them of the value of those CTE programs, the quality of education that's being delivered, and the benefits that it would have for their organization to kind of lower or remove the age restrictions in order to get them a more robust talent pipeline. But it does exist out there.
I don't know timing wise if we're okay for a few more questions.
We're coming up on time. Again, I see one in here, just how can I connect as I'm trying to open a training center here in Michigan. Ms. Tanner, download. I know there is a way for us, if you scan the code here, you can fill out a form, tell us what you're wanting, and we'll get back with you to kind of see how we might be able to help you or how we can support you. Happy to do that. And again, anyone else, if there is anything that you need from me personally, I think if you go to the next slide, my email is on there, especially with, you know, advocacy or regulatory related things. Just email me directly, things like the gainful employment or state level scope of practice or certification topics. Just reach out to me as well. We will try and get, I don't know, we'll work at putting maybe a certificate of completion on this webinar when we send it out to the final group. We know that's always a request at the end of each of these. I hope that you guys found it valuable and got some good information. I know how important stats are when we're trying to fight for money and resources and things like that. So hopefully you got some from this, and hopefully you'll download the full industry outlook to get additional information that might be helpful for you as well.
Jessica, thank you so much. This was fascinating, and thank you everyone for attending. We hope to see you on future webinars here hosted by NHA. So have a wonderful rest of your day. And again, Jessica, thank you so much.
Thank you.